Today we're going to look at the datetime module in Python. Very useful module. There's other ways besides pulling in the datetime module. You could handle dates. You could do some manipulation in strings and do some calculations on your own. But what you'd find is using this datetime module would just give you so many more tools than you would be able to build on your own, and save you a lot of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to import 3 objects from the datetime module. In the first object here we're going to use with this from datetime import date is going to be the date, and this object just contains a date. It's the date. It's like 12/15/2019 or whatever. It is just a date. Now, this other object that we're going to look at from datetime is just a time. Whether it's 2 in the afternoon or 2 a.m. in the morning, it's just a time. And now the third object that we're going to work with today is the date time. And the date time is a combination of a date and a time. You see similar things with like a timestamp. Things get time-stamped, and they call it timestamp, but it really is a date timestamp. So this is really useful because it's basically a combination of a date and a time. So we're going to import that in the same way we did the date and the time. Okay, so now we have 3 new objects to work with in Python because we imported them from the datetime module. And one really useful thing here, it's with the date object. Let's look at that one first, and we're going to make a variable, and we're going to call it today date, for today's date. And I go equals date, which is the date object. And if I go today, what this is going to do, it's going to pull in the current date. So I'm using the today method of this object, and it's going to pull in today's date and put it in this thing called today date. And to verify this works, let's do a print. And what's our called? It's called today date. Okay. So very small program thus far. We're going to get it bigger here as we do more numerous and then also more complex things. This simple program just imports these 3 objects, and then it decides to use one of the objects, the date object, and a method of that object called today to pull in today's date. So let's run this. Oh, it's going to make us save. Let's find a suitable name. Increment the number a little bit. Okay, so it runs and it pulls in the current date that's on my system. There's other ways to pull tried to pull international time zones and whatever, but just by default and by the current, it's pulling in what my current local PC has, and this is the date here. Might not be this date everywhere on the Earth, but it gives the current date or date time of your local machine. Obviously, if for whatever reason your local machine is off, there's some issues with it. Your operating system's confused. It hasn't resynced up any date up on the internet or anything, and you could have an incorrect date. But I'm assuming, and in most, that your PC or my PC or wherever you're running this has the correct date. Okay, so that's kind of neat, in that it lets us figure out today's date, which might not seem overly important right away, but it is hugely important, especially if you're doing you're writing a piece of Python code that runs, let's say, a daily report or a weekly report somewhere on the end. Once your program's done doing whatever calculations you needed to do for the business problem you were solving, a lot of times you like to put, if it's a report, put the date of the report so you know how fresh your data is. So this is a really common thing to use, today, because that's it. Like I said, if you produce some sort of report, it's always good to put a date on that, so you know what data you're talking about. How fresh is your data? When was it last run, and whatnot. So let's look at some of the more things we can do here. And let's copy this over here to see if we save a little space and time. And let's make another one called today, date, time. And we're going to use the date, time. And we're going to change that to okay. So what we do with this one, we want to do the same thing, and to get the date time, we use the now method. So in the date time object, the now method basically puts the current timestamp, date time out there. So let's try this. Okay, so it looks like we have a date time, and you notice the time comes back in what you may call military time, or what if you basically starting at the first hour would be 1 a.m. and then so on. Then at 12 we hit which it would be noon. We switch over, so 1538 basically says that we ran this at 3:38 and 46 seconds. And of course it even goes further than that. In most Python applications that you're running, that you're really not going to consider the probably won't even consider the seconds, let alone the milliseconds and whatnot. But it can capture that, if that's something you need, and in a lot of scientific applications, that might be just what you need. So now we're gonna go try something else. Okay. We're going to make a new variable, and we're going to call it 4th of July. And we're going to assign it 1976 year, July 4th. So right now we're basically creating using just a date and using this thing called we're creating, and we're using a constructor saying, okay, we want to force our date into the 4th of July. Let's change our spelling here. Let's print this. There we go. And so now we're going to print it. There we go. So we have 4th of July a long time ago. Okay. Let's say you were interested in 4th of July, but you could be also interested in other dates. So let's just add another date, and then we're gonna work on subtracting them. But we want to get a couple dates that here. So let's find the 5th of May. So we're gonna go 5th of May. Okay. And we're just gonna we're gonna keep it the same year, 5/5, and let's see if we can get this right. And we're gonna do a quick print before we try any calculations with these dates. So we print it out. So we have way back in 1976, we have the 4th of July and the 5th of May. Let's say that you had a good time celebrating the 5th of May, Independence Day. But, you also want to celebrate another Independence Day. And you're wondering, between the two countries' Independence Days that I picked in this program, how long do you have to wait to celebrate again? So what we can do is we can set up something called, let's set up a new variable, and we're going to call it days wait. And now when you have to figure out how many days between the 5th of May and the 4th of July that you're going to have to wait to be able to celebrate another country's Independence Day. So we go days wait equals, let's get the 5th of May minus the 4th of July. And this is really nice. These dates are able to handle that, because what this means, being able to do that, subtract one date from another, you can do some really intricate calculations in your program. You could look at like giant sets of data based on today's date that you pulled in. You could see, let's say a common one, list of people. We need to find everyone over the age of 18. So at a given date or something like that. So you have the ability to do math easily with these dates. A date date, I guess, date math with these, and that is just, yeah, that is very helpful. And there we go. We had minus 60 days, and being able to do that can let us use Python to parse through the data and make some business analytics decisions. Determining what group of people had hit 21 or whatever date that is, given today's date and a birth date. It's just a very useful tool to have out there. And once again, that's from the date time module. Okay, so now we looked at the being able to look at one comparison of dates to differences by subtracting. Let's look at some more things. Let's set a time, and we're going to call this time T time, and let's say T, where you happen to be, is at 4:30. So we run this, and if we look down here, we get nothing because I forgot to do a print. Okay, so let's go back and print T time. We assigned it but didn't print it. Okay, so we run our T time, and it's at 4:30, but what can you tell me about that? If you look at that, well, that's really 4:30 a.m. That is a very early tea time. So if we were to want to put 4:30 in the afternoon, which seems like a more reasonable time to drink some tea, we would have to add 12 to it, because we have it's 24 hours in a day, and we're really putting this in military time here. So it runs again, and now we have a true afternoon tea time. Now I'm going to pull this again, and we're going to do very similar, but we're going to call this T date time, because we're going to pull in a date time. So where we had time before, now we're going to say date time, and let's get a little more complex. Say 2019. So we're going to name a date 11/12, and then 16/30. So we set a date for T and a time and a date time on November 12th of 2019 at 4:30 in the afternoon. So let's run this, and that's what we get. You see we have took it in November 12th at 4:30 in the afternoon. Now I want to go over another interesting thing you can do with date time. So let's redefine the 4th of July. So we're gonna grab it up here, copy it down, and we're gonna keep it at 4th of July, but we're gonna go date time, strp time. And what this is going to do, the strp time, basically it's a method of the date time that lets you take in a string and parse the string. And you could do some interesting things with this. And so let's say you pull from a Excel file, or maybe a text file, or any type of file, or maybe a database. You pulled some data in, and your data is in a kind of a common format. It looks like this. Very common. I'm sure most of you have seen that for dates before. And no matter what the format it is, you can read it in, and we have some special format characters. And the M, and for the month, which is going to default 2 digits, and the day default 2 digits, and the year. Okay, the little y gives us a 2-digit year, but it looks like ours is ours is a 4-digit year, so we got to go with the big Y. There's a fair amount of these. Some of the more common ones, if you're doing a lot of date time manipulation in Python, you'd come to know. If you can't remember all the date time formats, don't worry about it. You can look it up in the docs. So it's nothing to have to memorize all of them. It just to know that they're out there, and that they, with the strp time method, we can go in and get a string that is given to us and turn it into a date time. Okay, let me fix that spelling there. And let me go and look, that looks good. So let's go and cross our fingers and hope this works. And it does work. It pulls it in. That is nice. But let's say your file's good for a while, and you made this Python program to pull in data, these string dates, and everything's picture perfect at work until your source data changes, and all of a sudden the source data looks like this. So let's see what this is going to do. Okay, it's going to say it doesn't match. So in our Python code, when using this, we have to match our source data. So what we can do, as we see how that's using a slightly different delimiter, we can follow suit. And now we can handle it this way also, which is nice. So we're able to handle it both of these common ways that we may see dates coming in, and of course many other ways you can do with the formats. Like I said, lots of formats out there. You probably really don't need to memorize these. Just kind of know that there's a strp time method that will parse a string for you and change it into a date time, because it is a useful tool to have.